When people ask me, oh, how did you learn Chinese? And when Chinese people ask me this question, I always say I taught myself. One of the most important parts of learning Chinese is, hey everyone, so my name is Kavi, and I've been living in China for 6 years now and learning Chinese for approximately 7 years now. And so today I wanted to tell you the story about how I learned Chinese. And if you're wondering where I'm walking right now, I'm actually walking on the greenway that's in my city that goes all the way throughout the city. So I'll show you what that looks like as well as I'm walking. So if we want to talk about where is the first time I actually saw Chinese characters, I would say when I was a kid, probably like 5, 6. And when I first saw the Chinese Connection, a Bruce Lee kung fu film. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Maybe you have. Later, I became very interested in Japanese culture, probably much earlier than a lot of people, because I'll just say now that my favorite movie when I was 7 was Spirited Away. And when I told people that, they didn't know that movie at all, especially when I was 7. So it became a lot popular after that. So my interest in Chinese and Japanese was always there, really. And so I had always seen Chinese characters, and I had always been fascinated about their meaning, and the symbolism behind them, because Chinese characters are pretty much symbols, right? And so fast forward to my university years, I actually got the opportunity to travel and intern in Japan. And so that was the first time I actually had the opportunity to study Japanese, which of course is not Chinese, but they have many similarities and a few differences, of course, as well. But if you're familiar with Japanese to any extent, you know that they use the kanji system, which is derived from the original traditional Chinese characters. And so I started to study a bit of Japanese before I would embark on my internship, my summer internship in Japan. So the way I first started studying Japanese and Japanese kanji, I remember I would write down the kanji on different post-its and write down the meaning and the Japanese pronunciation on different post-its, and I would put all of these post-its on my wall. And so I could take a look at all the different characters that I was learning, all the different symbols. And I remember thinking, like, it looked so interesting. And I was actually starting to learn a bit of Japanese. I think I understood a bit of Japanese already because I watched anime frequently when I was a child growing into my adulthood. Maybe a lot of you could sympathize. But yeah, that's when I started learning Japanese. And I actually spent 2 summers, so about 6 months altogether, interning as an English teacher in Japan. So after my time in Japan, I would say I had a pretty good grasp, a pretty good understanding of Japanese. I wouldn't say it's a very high level because Japanese is also a very difficult language as well. And there's a lot of grammar rules and the way that they switch from like Chinese pronunciation to Japanese pronunciation, the 3 different types of alphabets, which I learned hiragana, katakana, and a bit of kanji. So I was already pretty familiar with Japanese, able to understand a decent amount, definitely not very advanced, probably intermediate level. So yeah, that's pretty much my experience learning Japanese when I was about 20, 21, 22. And so after I graduated from university, there was a couple of reasons why I decided I wanted to come to China. And some of them being that I made some Chinese friends in my university. I had a lot of Chinese interactions, seeing a lot of Chinese students in my university as well. And at that time, when I checked my university job hunting website, like the university career website where they post job opportunities, there were so many teaching jobs available for teaching English in China. And so I would say I already had experience teaching English in Japan. And so why not? Why not go to China? Why not have this great opportunity to see what China would be like? And I'll tell you that I had the idea the whole time of, oh yeah, I'll just go to China for 1 year and then I will go back to Japan. Because at that time, I really loved Japan. It was the first time I ever experienced Japanese culture. And so I really thought in my mind that I would return to Japan after maybe 1 year working in China. And so a year after I graduated from university, I was working in the US for a year, and I already planned my trip to China, which required me to get a TEFL certificate, teaching English as a foreign language certificate, which was pretty easy to attain online at the time, and a couple of documents that needed to be verified by the government, like police checks and things like that. And so during that whole year that I was working, I was preparing to go to China. And another thing that I did during that year was sign up for my first Chinese class. So maybe I shouldn't say my first Chinese class, because before I graduated from university, I remember my senior year, I was taking this extracurricular Chinese class that was taught by some master's students, and there was quite a few people that were taking it. I remember that first I wanted to take the Korean class because at the time I kind of liked K-pop. This is before like it exploded in America, but it was still quite a bit popular. And so I showed up for the Korean class on like the first day, and it was just packed. It was a big room, but still it was like 70 people in there or maybe more. And they were all there to take this extracurricular Korean class. So I was like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I joined this Chinese class, which had about 10 students, I guess, and it was taught by two different master's students. And it was very much like a small seminar kind of class. And that was the first time I actually experienced taking a Chinese class. But like I said, after I graduated, I enrolled in a Chinese course, an intermediate Chinese course, I might add, at my local state university's Confucius Institute. So I don't know if you're aware of these Confucius Institutes. I don't know if they still exist in America. But yeah, they were all about promoting Chinese culture at a lot of universities. So the university in my state, the state university, had a Confucius Institute where I decided to enroll in an intermediate Chinese class, even though I could barely read characters at that point. So I remember showing up to that class, and I think it was legit just me and another girl who had already been to China or something. And I think she was like Canadian or something. I don't remember. But I think it was like 2 or maybe 3 students. And the book was an intermediate Chinese book. And so most of it had characters. And so I was still learning how to read pinyin, which is like the pronunciation of Chinese characters at the time. So as you could see, I was trying to accelerate my Chinese learning, because by the fall, by September, I would be flying to China. And so I think the course was about 6 months total during the winter semester. And so I started taking my Chinese course, and I took it very seriously, very diligently. I really tried to learn as much as I could, and that Chinese teacher gave me my Chinese name, which I still use today, which is Kai Wei, and I'll always remember that. So it was September 2019 when I first arrived to Chengdu Airport, and I remember I was walking out of the airport that day with a teacher who came from the school to pick me up, and I just looked at the sky and it was completely gray. And I was like, wow, this is going to be a great start to me living in a new place. And so did I mention my contract was for a year, and I was working at a vocational college here in Chengdu. So most of the students were 18, 19, 20, and I was the only foreign teacher on a campus of like 15,000 students. And so it was an interesting time. It was a really interesting time. And more than that, I really enjoyed that time. I worked at that same school for 4 years, and I was the only foreign teacher. Everyone else in that school, the other teachers, the students, the staff, were Chinese. And so there were only a few teachers who could speak English. Most of the teachers in the English department could speak English, and they were all very kind to me, all very nice throughout the 4 years. And I'm so happy to have met them. And I had a lot of good memories. But as we all know, during that time as well, winter 2020, COVID struck, and that is when everything got pretty depressing. And so I don't really like to talk about those times, but it was also at that time that I started studying Chinese more frequently. And I was studying Chinese on my own in my apartment, partially because I couldn't leave at some points, but partially because that was the best time to study Chinese or study a foreign language, because you had all that time and you couldn't really do anything else. You couldn't really go outside. And so a lot of that time I spent in my apartment reading Chinese books, textbooks, and I made these flashcards of Chinese characters using index cards, which helped a lot when learning Chinese, because I'll share something with you. One of the most important parts of learning Chinese is memory skills. The most important skills when learning Chinese. So your memory skills, your ability to memorize characters is a very important attribute to learning Chinese quickly and understand Chinese characters. So there are thousands of Chinese characters, all with different attributes, different details. But of course they have similar parts, that's how you learn Chinese. And so when you're studying Chinese, you need to use some sort of flashcards. Of course, there are apps available now. But at the time, I feel like tactile flashcards, being able to touch and feel them, was the most effective way for me to learn during that time. And that's why when people ask me, oh, how did you learn Chinese? And when Chinese people ask me this question, I always say I taught myself. And they're always like, what? Li hai, which it means amazing, fantastic. Like, it means super good. And so, yeah, I did kind of teach myself Chinese during that time. Of course, living in the environment becomes one of the most important factors when really learning and immersing yourself in a language. Of course, I had that Chinese environment, but at the same time, I was, stranded. I was displaced during COVID, and it had its toll on me. But at the end of it, I came out stronger and I came out with better Chinese. And so that's really all you could hope for. And so after that, I remember I spent one summer, probably 2022 or 2023, taking a Chinese summer course. And there I had some teachers. I had a teacher, and I think it was once or twice a week. And so at that time, I also was taking Chinese classes for a bit. And so after that, maybe for like 2 years, I didn't take any new Chinese courses. I just stopped taking Chinese. I had other priorities. I was thinking about other things, trying out different things. And then it was not until this year, this summer, that I started taking Chinese classes once again. Because I just thought my level now, okay, first of all, I learned Chinese in a few classes, 2 classes, okay, during a 7-year period. Maybe 3 classes if you count the one I took in America. And all the rest of the time, I was learning myself, used a couple of apps, used index cards, tried memorization skills, and most importantly, interacting with my Chinese environment, interacting with, seeing signs in the store or outside, walking outside, just wherever you go, wherever you see Chinese, you start to put a name to the character, a meaning to the character, and it just was developed over those years. And so, of course, I would tell you the best way to learn Chinese is to have that Chinese environment, to have that language environment. You will learn much more quickly. Of course, you have apps like iTalki and Hello Talk, which allows you to talk to people in China. So it gives you translation. And that is, of course, a great tool I've used before. But it doesn't beat visiting the country, setting your feet on the ground, hearing people talk, looking at signs, looking at the details everywhere you go. And that is what truly helped me to develop a pretty high level of Chinese. And so now I am taking Chinese classes again. I am learning more characters. I would say before my Chinese was pretty advanced for listening and speaking overall, maybe reading as well. You don't learn how to write Chinese anymore because you don't need to know how to write Chinese for the most part. But one of my hobbies, one of my activities that I have been practicing is calligraphy. I also make calligraphy art, which I want to share with you in some later videos. But over time, my Chinese was not too bad since this summer. And now that I'm taking classes again, specifically a business Chinese class where you learn a lot of new words, okay, I am very grateful to be learning Chinese, and maybe I will continue taking Chinese this year once a week. I think that would be good for me to continue because I've been here for 6 years. And so I really feel like to immerse myself more into the culture, to learn more, to potentially do business more in China, to understand the people and the concepts, it's just something I need to do. And I know foreigners who have spent years in China and their Chinese is poor. And so that's okay too, because you can live that way in China if you want to. But for me, as somebody who wants to truly absorb the culture, I realize that learning Chinese is a part of my plan. And so I will continue to learn Chinese, at least when the availability allows me to. So that's where I'm at right now with my Chinese level. I'm pretty proud of myself for what I'm able to understand and how I'm able to interact with my environment living in China. And Chinese is not an easy language to learn. In fact, I would consider it one of the hardest languages to learn, especially if you have never interacted with such a language before. First of all, the words are symbols. They are mostly single syllables, and the pronunciation is tonal, which I have to say is something that I do not really care for, using the correct tones when I'm speaking. But there's a secret about how to do that, which maybe I'll share with you in another video. But yeah, pretty much this is my experience learning Chinese. So I hope I can share with you more videos about learning Chinese, because it's simply very fascinating. As somebody whose mother tongue is English, my first language is English, and so it's such a different experience, and there's so many different things about it. If you could appreciate a language like that, then I want you to learn more about it with me. I would love to talk to you more about learning Chinese and the significance of Chinese and how it is so different. So I'm happy to share with you my experience learning Chinese. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, if you enjoyed my ideas and what I'm sharing with you about modern Chinese culture, then subscribe to the channel. Leave a like, leave a comment. Are you trying to learn Chinese? What do you think about learning Chinese? And I will see your comments. And of course, I will see you in the next video.